Failure doesn't announce itself with a trumpet. It arrives quietly through the unanswered message, the delayed call, the sudden silence where applause used to be. It doesn't break you all at once. It dissolves you slowly, layer by layer, until even your reflection starts to feel like a stranger. This is the breaking point, not the end, but the pause before rebirth, the moment the world stops spinning, forcing you to look inward instead of outward. He stands there motionless, feeling the stillness sting his pride. Once he was filled with certainty. He had visions of success, of recognition, of proving them wrong. But tonight, the mirror shows a different truth. The dreamer is bruised, the plan is broken, and the noise of ambition has turned into a whisper of self-doubt. The first lesson of transformation begins here: acceptance. Not the kind that means surrender, but the kind that means seeing things as they are. He takes a deep breath, one that feels heavier than it should. Every breath is a confession. I failed, I tried, and I don't know what comes next. Most people never reach this point honestly. They distract themselves. They escape into excuses, blaming fate, luck, or timing. But real growth only begins when blame dies, when you stop pointing outward and begin the painful excavation of your own patterns. Napoleon Hill once wrote, "Every adversity carries within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. But to find that seed, you must first stand in the ashes without pretending the fire didn't hurt." He looks around the room. Every object tells a story: the whiteboard filled with crossed-out goals, the coffee mug that fueled countless late nights, the half-torn vision board. In the silence, the truth surfaces. The failure wasn't a single event. It was a series of ignored lessons, the skipped habits, the undisciplined thoughts, the comfort chosen over courage. For the first time, he doesn't fight the guilt, he studies it. Because guilt, when examined with honesty, transforms into guidance. He sits down, opens a blank page, and writes one sentence. Where did I stop being the person I promised myself I'd become? The pen shakes, but the line stands. He writes another, and another. Not affirmations, confessions. The truth, raw and unfiltered, begins to pour out. Failure is not the opposite of success, it is the refinery of success. But few survive its heat because they misinterpret its purpose. They believe failure destroys identity, when in fact it removes false identities, the ones built on validation, ego, or speed. Here, in this silent room, humility takes its throne. He realizes that strength is not built by winning, it's built by not collapsing after losing. Strength is the ability to face yourself without disguises, to see the weaknesses, the fears, the hesitation, and still say, I will begin again. Outside, dawn hasn't yet arrived. But the darkness feels different now, not oppressive, but cleansing. It's the kind of night that strips you of illusion so you can rebuild from truth. He remembers every person who once doubted him, every friend who stopped calling, every failure that piled upon the other. Yet instead of anger, he feels a strange stillness, because deep down he begins to understand they were never the enemy. His own inertia was, his own inconsistency, his own inability to adapt. To rewire failure into strength, one must first dissect failure without flinching. That's what this moment is, an autopsy of his old self. Each broken piece of the dream is a mirror reflecting something deeper. The desire to be seen, the fear of being forgotten, the hunger to matter, and yet in this stillness he discovers something unexpected: awareness. Awareness that maybe the dream had to break so he could see what it was built on. If it was built on ego, it was meant to fall. If it was built on faith, it will rise again stronger, simpler, purer. He closes his eyes and imagines himself standing at a cliff behind him, everything familiar. Ahead, only fog. He doesn't need to see the whole path. He just needs to take one honest step. This, he realizes, is the first spark of transformation. Humility, followed by motion. The world glorifies those who never fall, but history remembers those who rose differently after they did. The man stands again, straightens the papers, not to fix the old plan, but to write a new one. His voice, soft but steady, breaks the silence. I am not done. I am only beginning from truth. He walks through the streets at dawn. The city still asleep, but his mind alive. Mist floats low over the pavement, the air cold enough to sting, yet cleansing like truth, washing through confusion. The world feels paused, as if creation itself has granted him an hour to look inward. Dawn is the hour of honesty, the time when noise fades and the mind begins to whisper what it has avoided all night. He walks slowly, his steps echoing softly against the stone, every footfall a thought, every breath a confession. He doesn't need music or company. Silence has become his mentor. Failure taught him one thing: when the world stops applauding, you finally hear your own thoughts clearly. He remembers the faces of people who once believed in him, the ones he disappointed, the ones he blamed, and the one he became when the mask of confidence cracked. It hurts to remember, but it's a clean kind of pain, the kind that removes infection. For the first time, he isn't running from the wreckage, he's studying it. He realizes that success never truly teaches, it only rewards. Failure, on the other hand, instructs. It speaks with the voice of truth, not praise. And so, as he walks through the half-lit streets, he begins what he later calls the silent audit. Every man must conduct this audit at least once in his life, a private investigation into his own patterns. No audience, no justifications, no performance, only the raw data of the soul. He begins by asking himself 3 ruthless questions. 1. What was I chasing, growth or validation? 2. What did I ignore when it warned me quietly? 3. Who was I trying to impress instead of improve? Each question lands like thunder, but he keeps walking. In the quiet corners of his mind, memories flicker like short films, moments he dismissed as bad luck, but now sees as clear warnings, the opportunities he mishandled, the mornings he snoozed instead of trained, the advice he ignored because it challenged his ego. He sees it all, and strangely, instead of shame, he feels a quiet power rising, because ownership is the birthplace of change. When a man stops blaming the world, he starts shaping it. He turns a corner and sees the first hint of light breaking through the clouds. The sun doesn't rush, it rises with dignity. And something about that calm rhythm teaches him a hidden law. The universe rewards alignment, not aggression. He realizes how much of his life was spent forcing outcomes instead of cultivating readiness. He wanted success, but he hadn't prepared for it. He wanted strength, but he hadn't built the rituals that sustain it. Every downfall he's endured, every betrayal, every delay, they weren't punishments. They were invitations to evolve. He whispers to himself, "If I had gotten everything I wanted back then, I would have lost it now." It's a sobering realization that delay is protection in disguise, and loss is often education misnamed. As he walks, he remembers the moment he first fell in love with his dream, how pure it was. Back then, his goals were driven by wonder. But over time, ambition turned mechanical. He started measuring his worth in numbers, not impact, followers, not faith. He realizes that his fall wasn't a single collapse, it was erosion, the slow decay of purpose under the weight of pride. So he decides to rebuild differently this time. No shortcuts, no illusions, no noise. He will become the man who deserves what he desires. That's the new creed forming in his heart, the creed of responsibility. Responsibility is not guilt, it's the ability to respond. He remembers blaming circumstances, the economy, timing, people, fate. But fate was never the problem. The real war was internal, his habits, his focus, his self-image. The more he walks, the more he sees how the mind creates cycles. Every belief, every thought, every fear forms circuitry that either empowers or imprisons you. To rewire failure into strength, one must first trace the faulty wiring, the beliefs that short-circuit progress. He realizes he's been operating with an old mental code. If I fail, I'm unworthy. Now he writes a new one in his mind. If I fail, I am being trained. That small shift in perception becomes the spark of evolution. He pauses by a small cafe, its light still off. The reflection in the window stares back at him, tired eyes, but alive. There's a strange beauty in brokenness when it's examined with awareness. He no longer despises the man in the reflection. He studies him. The way one studies a blueprint, not to criticize, but to understand how to rebuild. He realizes something profound. You cannot transform what you refuse to look at. The mind loves denial because denial delays discomfort, but denial also delays destiny. He breathes in the cold morning air, each inhale an act of ownership. He decides that from this day forward, every choice, every thought, every outcome will belong to him. If he wins, it's because of him. If he loses, it's because of him. There will be no middle ground. That is the silent contract every achiever signs with destiny, full responsibility, or none at all. He continues walking, and memories transform into lessons. The failed deal taught him patience. The betrayal taught him discernment. The burnout taught him balance. The loss taught him gratitude. Nothing was wasted. Everything was data divine, precise data. He understands now that life is a constant audit of who you are versus who you could be. Every event, every failure, every delay, a ledger entry. And you are both the accountant and the debtor. He smiles faintly. The realization doesn't hurt anymore, it liberates. Because when you see life as feedback, not punishment, every loss becomes instruction. The city slowly begins to wake. Lights flicker in apartment windows. Cars hum in the distance. But he keeps walking, slower now, as if each step is rewriting his relationship with the past. In his mind, he begins to reconstruct the timeline not as a series of failures, but as an intricate training sequence. He sees that every person who doubted him was a mirror showing his insecurities. Every rejection was guidance, redirecting him to alignment. Every breakdown was a recalibration. He whispers, "I wasn't falling apart. I was being rearranged." That's the essence of wisdom, to reinterpret pain without resentment. As the first rays of the sun reach his face, something inside him settles. He understands that the audit isn't about finding fault, it's about finding clarity. He forgives himself for being human, for expecting progress without process, for chasing success without service. Forgiveness doesn't erase responsibility, it strengthens it. Because when you forgive, you stop fighting the past and begin building the future. He stops by a bench and sits quietly. No music, no phone, no distraction, just the hum of life returning. He feels an odd gratitude, not for success, but for awareness. Because awareness is wealth. And he is rich again, not in possessions, but in perception. He looks up at the rising sun and feels something ancient awaken, that silent fire Napoleon Hill wrote about, the one that lies dormant in every human heart until struggle strikes the match. This is that flame, quiet, humble, unstoppable. He knows the path ahead will still be hard. The world won't change overnight, but he has changed, and that changes everything. Every thought, every choice from here on will pass through this new filter. Does this align with the man I am becoming? He smiles faintly, because that question alone will prevent the old cycle from returning. He whispers softly, as if making a pact with the dawn. From now on, my excuses are invalid. Only truth remains. The city around him stirs. Somewhere, a door opens. A bird sings. And in that sound, he hears a message. The universe never stops giving you chances, it just waits for you to stop wasting them. He stands once more, the sun now painting his face with gold. The silent audit is complete. He has reclaimed authorship of his story. For the first time, he feels peace, not because life is perfect, but because he finally stopped lying to himself. This is the quiet revolution that begins every comeback, not in noise or drama, but in honesty. A close-up of his eyes as he visualizes his brain rewiring itself, sparks of determination flicker. The camera drifts inward, past the surface of his stare, into the invisible architecture of his mind, neurons glowing like constellations, signals racing through electric bridges of thought. The old patterns, once dominant, begin to fade like dimming stars, while new connections start to form, fragile, yet full of possibility. There comes a moment in every person's evolution when self-awareness must evolve into self-engineering. Reflection alone cannot rebuild a life, it must be paired with construction. That's what this morning feels like. Not just recovery, but reconstruction. The man now understands that his transformation will not happen in his circumstances. First, it will happen in the invisible laboratory of his mind. He has begun to feel it, the subtle hum of change, the way the mind shifts its circuitry when you begin to think differently. Scientists call it neuroplasticity, but Napoleon Hill described it decades earlier in spiritual language. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. The old hymn might have dismissed that as philosophy, but today, standing at the threshold of rebirth, he realizes its biology. His thoughts are literally electrical. Each belief is a circuit, each emotion a surge of current, each habit a well-worn neural path that the brain strengthens through repetition. For years, he unknowingly rehearsed weakness, repeating patterns of fear, comparison, procrastination, and doubt. Now he is learning the secret law. The brain does not care what you repeat, it simply obeys repetition. That truth hits him like lightning. He whispers, almost in awe, "So I've been training myself to fail, just by thinking like a failure." It's not a confession, it's liberation, because what can be trained in one direction can be retrained in another. If the brain is programmable, then he is both the coder and the code. The inner circuit is his new dominion. He sits down at his desk, the same one that once symbolized frustration, but today it feels sacred. He closes his eyes, takes a slow breath, and begins a simple exercise. For the next 5 minutes, he will do nothing but visualize one image, himself succeeding not in the loud cinematic way, but in quiet mastery. He imagines waking early, full of energy. He imagines staying calm under pressure. He imagines making decisions with clarity, moving through the day with purpose. The mind, he knows now, doesn't differentiate between imagined experience and real experience. Repetition in the mental realm builds the same neurological tracks as repetition in the physical one. Each image is a signal, each signal a spark, each spark a rewiring. He can almost feel the shift, like the soft click of a gear finding its rightful place. For years, he fed his brain the language of failure. He'd say, "I can't do this," or "I'm not ready yet," or "maybe I'm just not that type of person." Every statement, he realizes, was not merely emotional, it was electrical. Each phrase laid down a circuit that shaped how his brain fired under stress. Now, he decides to reverse the current. He whispers aloud, "I can rebuild, I can learn, I can rewire, I can rise." It feels awkward at first, almost childish, but that awkwardness is proof that new neural roads are being paved. Growth feels unnatural because it is the process of making the unfamiliar familiar. He writes in his notebook, "Repetition is worship. What I repeat, I become." This becomes his new law. He spends the next hour studying his own thoughts, almost like an engineer troubleshooting a system. When do I feel weakest? What thought precedes every setback? What emotion triggers self-sabotage? He realizes that every failure followed a similar pattern: emotion, thought, action, result. And if the emotion remains unchecked, the thought repeats. If the thought repeats, the brain hardwires it as truth. This is why discipline is not just about behavior, it's about emotional regulation, because emotion is the electrical surge that decides which circuits stay alive. Fear fuels one pathway, courage fuels another. He closes his eyes again. He remembers a moment from his past, standing on stage, about to present his idea, his hands trembling, his mind whispering, "You'll mess up." And he did. Not because he lacked talent, but because his circuitry was wired for doubt. The brain had learned that fear equals safety, that playing small equals survival. Now he breathes into that same memory, but this time he visualizes a different outcome. He sees himself standing tall, breathing deeply, speaking calmly. His voice doesn't shake, it carries conviction. The brain doesn't know this didn't happen. It only records the emotional state attached to the image. By replaying it with strength instead of fear, he overwrites the old program. He smiles faintly. This is how the rewiring happens, thought by thought, image by image. In this moment, he understands the genius of failure. Each collapse was not a verdict, it was a signal showing which circuits needed repair. Without failure, he would have never noticed them. Pain, he realizes, is a flashlight. It illuminates the broken connections inside. Every time you fail, the universe is showing you where your neural map no longer serves your evolution. He leans back in his chair, eyes still closed, and visualizes his mind like a galaxy, billions of connections forming constellations of possibility. Somewhere in that vast field, his old self, the fearful, doubtful, impatient version, still flickers faintly like a dying star. But around it, new constellations are emerging, built from faith, discipline, and focus. He whispers, "Every thought is a choice, every choice a wire, every wire a future." Outside, the morning light grows brighter. Inside, he feels something even brighter: control. Not the kind that manipulates outcomes, but the kind that masters input. He finally understands the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is automatic, the brain replaying an old pattern. Response is conscious, the mind choosing a new one. Every time he pauses before reacting, he weakens the old circuit. Every time he responds differently, he strengthens the new one. This is the hidden science of self-mastery, the fusion of biology and intention. He remembers reading that the average person thinks 60,000 thoughts a day, and most of them are repeats from yesterday. That means his brain for years was living yesterday's story on loop. Now, he decides that today will be different. Today, he will interrupt the loop. He will not let his past dictate his circuitry. He writes on the page again, in large, bold letters, "I am the architect of my neural kingdom." Throughout the day, he practices small rewiring rituals. When he feels doubt, he closes his eyes and says, "Rewire." When he feels anger, he breathes deeply and says, "Rewire." When fear whispers, he smiles and says, "Rewire." Each word is a switch, a reminder that he is no longer a slave to automatic emotion. At first, the old habits fight back. Doubt doesn't die quietly, it negotiates. Fear doesn't fade easily, it disguises itself as logic. But he persists, because persistence itself is rewiring. He learns that the brain resists new patterns not because they are wrong, but because they are unfamiliar. The unfamiliar feels unsafe, even if it's better for you. That's why discipline must be emotional, not mechanical. You have to convince your nervous system that growth is safe. He whispers again, "It's safe to win, it's safe to shine, it's safe to grow." Each phrase, repeated with conviction, becomes insulation for his new circuits. Later that evening, he sits near his window, watching the city lights flicker. It dawns on him that society trains people to focus on output goals, money, recognition, but almost no one trains the input thoughts, energy, emotion, the invisible systems running the machine. No wonder so many feel powerless. They try to change results without changing the wiring producing them. He sees it clearly. Now, success is a neurological pattern that must be rehearsed daily. Just as muscles grow by consistent tension, the mind grows by consistent direction. He recalls a phrase from Hill's Think and Grow Rich: "You become what you think about most of the time." Now he understands it literally. Each time he holds a thought long enough, his brain wires it more deeply. So he decides to hold the image of strength longer each day. 5 minutes today, 10 tomorrow, 20 the next. He imagines not a perfect man, but a disciplined one, a calm one, a man who doesn't crumble under uncertainty but adapts, a man who replaces panic with purpose, reaction with reasoning. That, he realizes, is real success, not control over the world, but command over self. Over the next few days, something subtle changes. He begins to notice his triggers more quickly, the things that used to agitate him. The delay, the rejection, the slow progress no longer pierces deeply. His mind, once quick to spiral, now pauses, breathes, and reorients. He begins to see failure itself as part of the rewiring process, each stumble another signal that an old circuit is dying. He stops saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and starts asking, "Which pattern is being corrected?" That one shift reframes his entire reality, because now even pain feels purposeful. Weeks pass. His energy changes. His words change. Even his posture begins to mirror this internal upgrade. People notice something different about him, not louder but lighter, not arrogant but unshakable. They can't explain it, but he can. He knows it's not luck, it's neuroarchitecture. It's the result of thousands of small decisions to think differently, respond consciously, and act intentionally. He has discovered that strength is not something you build, it's something you awaken. It was always there, hidden beneath fear's static. Rewiring simply clears the interference. That night, he looks up at the stars, billions of distant lights connected across space. He realizes his mind is not so different. Every spark of belief, every pulse of thought connects to something vast and unseen. If the brain can be rewired, then destiny can be rewritten. If neurons can realign, then so can fate. He smiles softly and says to the silence, My future is being built in my thoughts. He closes his eyes one final time and sees the image again, his brain glowing, firing, expanding circuits, forming bridges where fear once built walls. He knows it's working, not because the world has changed yet, but because he has. And that's where all rewiring begins, in the unseen, silent electricity of belief. Fire meets metal forging imagery. He lifts the same burden that once broke him. Sparks rise in slow motion, the sound of heat humming like the voice of destiny. His hands tremble, not from weakness but from memory. This is where it happened before, where he collapsed, where his strength failed him. But tonight, he returns not as the same man. He comes as the reforged version of himself. There is a silence that follows every storm, not the silence of peace, but the silence of aftermath. The air still holds the scent of smoke. The ground still remembers the weight of the battle. He stands in that silence now, and for the first time, he does not resent the pain that shaped him. He studies it the way a blacksmith studies molten metal, knowing that fire, though destructive, is also the only element capable of refinement. Pain, he realizes, is the universe's forge. It burns away all that is untrue, all that is unready. The fire does not ask for permission. It consumes whatever stands between you and your potential. He looks at his hands, the same hands that once trembled when faced with defeat, but now those hands are steady. They've built again, lifted again, written again. Their scars are not decorations, they are data proof of endurance, proof of lessons learned through fire. He breathes deeply and whispers, "No pain wasted," because that's the law of alchemy. Every scar is a signal, every burn a message, every ache a teacher. The pain you resist remains your enemy. The pain you study becomes your mentor. In the early days, he feared pain. He ran from it, like most people do. Every disappointment felt like punishment, every rejection a verdict. But pain was never sent to destroy him. It was sent to introduce him to himself. When everything is easy, you learn nothing about your limits. When everything is hard, you learn who you really are. He remembers the first time life humbled him, a project that failed, a dream that collapsed. Back then, he thought pain meant he was cursed. Now he knows pain was simply the currency of evolution. You cannot buy wisdom with comfort. You must pay for it with fire. Each failure was a crucible, each loss a lesson. In every moment of despair, something was burning, not his destiny, but his dependence on illusion. That's the hidden gift of suffering. It removes what cannot stay and reveals what must remain. He walks to the old gym, the place where he used to train before giving up. The doors creak, the smell of metal and sweat filling the air. It's empty now, but the echoes are alive, the sounds of weights clanging, of breath breaking, of people pushing themselves to their limits. He walks to the corner where he once collapsed from exhaustion. He remembers the humiliation, the laughter, the judgment, the whispers of, "He's not built for this." That moment haunted him for years. But tonight he kneels, touches the ground, and thanks it. Because that place wasn't where he failed, it was where he stopped pretending. It was the beginning of truth. Pain has a way of peeling away pride. It brings you to your knees not to break you, but to align you. In kneeling, you rediscover humility, and in humility, you rediscover power. He stands again, grips the same weight that once defeated him. His muscles remember the old tremor, but his mind is different now. There's no panic, no self-doubt, only rhythm. He exhales and lifts, slowly, controlled, intentional. The bar rises, not because his body suddenly became stronger, but because his perception of pain changed. He no longer fights the discomfort. He flows with it. Pain, he realizes, is not resistance. It's communication. Each pulse, each strain, each burn is the body's way of saying, "You are expanding capacity." This becomes his new meditation, to turn every moment of pain into fuel. When disappointment stings, he breathes and says, "Transmute." When exhaustion whispers, he replies, "Transmute." When fear resurfaces, he repeats, "Transmute." He begins to see that transmutation, the spiritual process of turning pain into power, is not abstract mysticism. It's practical psychology. It's the discipline of interpreting suffering through purpose. Every person suffers, but not every person extracts from that suffering. Some drown in it, some deny it. A rare few distill it, and he has decided to become one of the rare few. He starts journaling again, but differently this time. Instead of writing about what hurts, he writes about what the hurt is teaching him. The betrayal, he writes, taught me to see without illusion. The rejection, he writes, taught me to build without approval. The loneliness, he writes, taught me to lead myself. Each line transforms pain from chaos into curriculum. This is alchemy, the inner laboratory where emotion turns into energy, and energy into evolution. He reads one of Napoleon Hill's old passages. Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. He underlines the word seed. A seed is buried. It must decay before it blooms. That is pain's secret purpose, to bury you deep enough for your roots to take hold. He finally understands pain is not proof of weakness. It is proof that you are being planted for greater growth. Days turn into weeks and something shifts. He starts to notice that the same situations that once drained him now sharpen him. The same critics who once discouraged him now amuse him. The same obstacles that once scared him now motivate him. He no longer prays for an easy path, he prays for endurance. Because ease never made him wise, struggle did. He begins to treat every painful moment as a weight on the soul, something meant to be lifted repeatedly until it strengthens the spirit. He writes again, pain is the gym of destiny. Every rep of hardship expands the heart's capacity for faith. Every set of loss builds resilience. Every tear sheds illusion. He doesn't seek to avoid difficulty anymore. He seeks to digest it, to absorb every nutrient hidden inside discomfort. One evening, while sitting near a bonfire with a small group of close friends, someone asks him, "If you could erase your hardest years, would you?" He doesn't even hesitate. "No," he says quietly, "those were the years that built me." They look puzzled. But he continues, "Those years were the fire that burned off my weakness. Without them, I'd still be living as a fraction of myself." He stares into the flames, each spark a reflection of his past struggles and smiles. Because now he knows that pain is not personal, it is elemental. It visits everyone. The difference is how you greet it. Most curse it. Few converse with it. But those who do, ascend. Late that night he dreams. In the dream he is walking through a workshop of glowing furnaces. The sound of hammers echoing, molten metal taking form. A voice calm, deep, ageless speaks. You cannot become gold without fire. He wakes with the words vibrating in his chest. They feel true because they are. Every great soul in history walked through fire, not around it, not above it, through it. The difference between the broken and the wise is not what they went through, but what they made of it. He starts sharing this idea with others, not as a teacher, but as a witness. When someone tells him they've lost everything, he listens and says, "Good. That means the false layers are gone." When someone says they feel stuck, he smiles softly and says, "Then you are being refined." When someone says life is unfair, he replies, "Life is always fair. It just hides its fairness inside the furnace." He doesn't speak these words arrogantly, he's lived them. He's earned them through nights of silence and mornings of struggle. This is what real power feels like, not dominance, but understanding. In the months that follow, the man who once feared pain becomes the one who welcomes it. He no longer interprets challenge as cruelty. He sees it as calibration. When tension rises, he reminds himself, pressure is proof that potential is waking up. Each time something hurts, he extracts wisdom from it, like a miner extracting gold from the depths of earth. Every heartbreak makes him more compassionate. Every delay makes him more patient. Every failure makes him more strategic. Nothing is wasted, nothing is random, everything refines. He has become the alchemist of his own destiny. And one morning, as he's training again, the same gym, same corner, a young man approaches him, struggling with the same exercise he once failed. The young man sighs, frustrated. "I don't think I'm built for this," he mutters. The man smiles faintly, hands him the weight, and says, "Neither was I, until I learned what pain was for." The young man looks confused. "What do you mean?" He replies, "Pain isn't punishment, it's preparation. The universe doesn't test your limits to humiliate you. It tests them to reveal you." He helps him lift, guides his breathing, and says, "Don't run from the burn. That's your body learning how to hold power." As the weight rises, something clicks not just in the young man's muscles, but in his spirit. The mentor smiles. "See? The same pain that once broke you can now teach others how to stand." That's the highest stage of transformation, when your scars become instruction manuals for others. When your suffering turns into service. Pain, once transmuted, becomes wisdom. And wisdom, when shared, becomes light. He now walks through life carrying that light quietly, humbly, not seeking attention, but radiating understanding. People often ask him, "How did you learn to stay so calm through chaos?" He answers, "Because I've been through fire. And once you've walked through fire, rain can't scare you." That night he sits by the window again, watching the moon cast its silver glow over the world. He thinks about all the times he wanted to give up, all the nights he begged for the storm to stop. And he realizes something profound. The storm never stopped. He simply learned how to dance in it. That's what alchemy really is, not escaping pain, but evolving with it. He closes his eyes, smiles, and whispers, "Every scar is sacred, because it means you lived, you endured, you grew, and most of all, you transformed." Early morning training. The world is still wrapped in darkness. Only a thin streak of dawn glows on the horizon. He stands barefoot on cold ground, the smell of dew in the air, his breath steady. A notebook lies open beside him. In front of him, silence. No phone, no noise, no audience, just the sound of his own heartbeat and the beginning of a new rhythm. The ritual of rebuilding begins. Discipline is not punishment. It is devotion. And this morning, he treats it like prayer. He has come to understand that success isn't built in explosions of effort, but in the quiet consistency of small, repeated acts, the kind that nobody sees, nobody applauds, and nobody even believes in until they start producing results too solid to deny. Once, he used to chase motivation, waiting for the right song, the right day, the right feeling. But motivation, he discovered, is like weather. It changes, it fades, it lies. Discipline, however, is climate permanent, predictable, and powerful enough to shape entire environments. So now, he chooses to build his life on discipline, not desire. The alarm rings before dawn. The bed whispers comfort, but he no longer listens. He has learned that every day begins with a choice, not between good and bad, but between easy and necessary. He stands up, stretches, and walks to the mirror. His eyes meet his own, calm, focused, unwavering. He whispers, "This is who I'm becoming." That one sentence repeated daily begins to sculpt him from the inside out. Because words are blueprints, and the subconscious mind is the architect waiting for direction. He starts his ritual. First, movement. The body wakes the mind. He trains in silence. No music, no distractions, just breath and motion. The repetition becomes meditation. Each push-up, each pull, each stride carries rhythm, not rage. Pain arises, but he welcomes it. Pain means presence. Pain means participation. The man who once feared discomfort now searches for it, because he knows it's the surest sign that the old self is dying and the new one is forming. As his heart rate climbs, he repeats his mantra, "Consistency is my covenant." He knows that every rep, every drop of sweat, is a deposit not in muscles but in mindset. Second, stillness. After training, he sits cross-legged on the floor. The room is quiet except for the sound of his breath. Meditation once felt impossible, his mind too loud, too restless, but now he understands that stillness is not the absence of thought, it's the mastery of reaction. He closes his eyes and watches his thoughts pass like clouds. One whispers of doubt, another of regret. He doesn't fight them, he observes them. In this still observation, he begins to notice the difference between thinking and awareness. Thinking is noise, awareness is command. The more he practices, the more space he creates between impulse and action, and in that space, strength grows. He smiles faintly. This, he realizes, is how discipline rewires the subconscious by teaching it calm under chaos. Third, writing. After meditation, he opens his notebook, the same one that once held pain. Now, it holds purpose. He writes 3 lines every morning. 1, who I am becoming. 2, what I will focus on today. 3, what I will refuse to waste energy on. He no longer journals as therapy, he journals as training. Each sentence is a command to his subconscious, an instruction written in ink and emotion. The subconscious, he learned, is the obedient servant of repetition. It does not distinguish truth from lie, only frequency from silence. If he tells it daily that he is disciplined, it will begin arranging his days to match. This is the quiet magic of consistency. It builds identity before it builds results. In the beginning, the results are invisible. No one notices when you wake early. No one claps when you choose discipline over distraction. No one congratulates you for saying no to comfort. But he doesn't do it for applause anymore. He does it because discipline has become identity, and identity is permanent. He knows that every morning he repeats this ritual. He sends a message to the universe. I am reliable. The universe always rewards reliability, not talent, not beauty, not even intelligence reliability. Because reality bends for those who show up regardless of how they feel. There's a sacred moment after each morning ritual when he just sits, not planning, not analyzing, simply feeling the quiet pride that only self-control can produce. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. He doesn't crave the world's approval anymore. He craves congruence, that feeling of being at peace with himself, because his actions finally match his ambitions. That is the essence of discipline, to act in harmony with your highest vision, even when your emotions beg for ease. As days pass, he begins to feel a strange shift in time. Days no longer blur together. Each one feels distinct, alive. Because discipline creates structure, and structure creates awareness. He notices that when he controls his mornings, he controls his mind. And when he controls his mind, the rest of the day follows naturally. The morning, he realizes, is a contract with destiny. Break it, and the rest of the day defaults to chaos. Keep it, and the rest of the day bends to your will. He now guards his mornings fiercely. No social media, no messages, no distractions before the ritual. His morning has become his cathedral, a sacred hour where the world cannot reach him. He reads one of Napoleon Hill's lines taped above his desk. Self-discipline begins with the mastery of your thoughts. If you do not control your thoughts, you cannot control your needs. He underlines it again, though he's read it 100 times. Because this truth never grows old, it simply deepens. Discipline is not about force. It's about focus. It's not punishment. It's protection. It shields your destiny from the chaos of impulsive living. He writes again in his journal, discipline is how I honor my potential. Every time he writes it, it sinks deeper. Every time he repeats it, it becomes real. Months pass, and the fruits begin to appear quietly, naturally. His work improves, his relationships stabilize, his energy multiplies, not because life got easier, but because he got orderly. The universe, he realizes, respects order. Where there is order, there is energy. Where there is energy, there is progress. Discipline, then, is not restriction, it's redirection. It channels chaos into creation. He begins to live by a simple equation. Disciplina è uguale a freedom. Every rule he follows liberates him from regret. Every schedule he honors protects him from confusion. Every small decision made consistently saves him from the tyranny of indecision later. Freedom is not the absence of rules, it's the mastery of rhythm. He notices something else. The quieter he becomes, the stronger he feels. There's a silent confidence that comes from private discipline, the kind that doesn't need to post progress or announce struggle. He doesn't broadcast his habits anymore. He protects them, because sacred things lose their power when overexposed. He now understands why the strongest people in the world move quietly. They don't talk about the climb. They live in the climb. They don't perform their pain. They process it. They don't chase validation. They radiate certainty. He decides that his life will be his statement, not his words. One morning, while meditating, a realization arrives like lightning. Discipline is love in its most practical form. Love for what you can become. Love for the future self who depends on your present actions. Love for the purpose that deserves your consistency. He remembers how harsh he used to be with himself, the self-criticism, the shame, the pressure. But discipline done right isn't cruelty. It's compassion that manifests as structure. He whispers softly, I'm not punishing myself, I'm protecting my evolution. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. His mornings become a sanctuary, his actions automatic. What once required willpower now happens with ease. That's the secret reward of true discipline. It eventually transforms effort into instinct. He no longer needs to remind himself to show up. His body craves it. His mind aligns naturally. He has reprogrammed his subconscious to crave structure the way it once craved comfort. He has learned that delayed gratification is not deprivation, it's the purest form of self-respect. It's the decision to give your future self the gift of peace rather than the burden of regret. Every time he resists the temptation to quit early, he's sending a signal to his subconscious. We are not slaves to emotion anymore. That signal, repeated daily, becomes his new default. He now views every day as a sequence of sacred appointments. An appointment with effort, an appointment with silence, an appointment with growth. And he never misses them, not because he has to, but because he wants to. He knows that success is not something that happens someday. It's something that accumulates every day in invisible layers of effort, faith, and discipline. When others ask him for shortcuts, he simply smiles. There are none, he says. There are only repetitions. One night he revisits his old notebooks, pages filled with chaos, frustration, and confusion. Reading them now feels like looking at a different lifetime. He no longer identifies with that version of himself, the one who waited for luck, who blamed time, who mistook movement for progress. He closes the old notebook and whispers, "Thank you for breaking. You taught me how to build." Because that's what discipline truly is, building where you once broke, standing where you once fell, and continuing where you once quit. The next morning, the sky is heavy with rain. He steps outside anyway. The cold water hits his face, but he doesn't flinch. His body moves, his breath steady. Every drop feels like a baptism, cleansing, renewing. Discipline has turned pain into peace, effort into ease, action into art. He no longer hopes to become strong someday. He is strong because he keeps showing up. He knows now that greatness is not a grand moment of destiny. It's a quiet collection of disciplined days stacked like bricks, each one small, each one sacred, each one essential. And so, in the rain, he moves calmly, rhythmically, purposefully. The man who once needed the world to motivate him has become his own source of momentum. He walks slowly towards sunlight, breaking through heavy clouds. Each step glows faintly in reflection, a man illuminated not by the sun itself, but by conviction. His lips move quietly. Affirmations, prayers, declarations. The world still looks the same, but something within him hums differently, a current of faith rising through every cell. There are invisible forces more powerful than gravity, more defining than circumstance, more magnetic than luck. Belief is one of them. It is the electricity of destiny, unseen yet commanding. He has come to realize that strength without belief collapses under pressure, and intelligence without faith turns into overthinking. The world doesn't bend for talent, it bends for certainty. When the storm of doubt hits, belief is the anchor that holds you upright. When vision blurs, belief becomes sight itself. This morning, as he speaks his affirmations while walking beneath a breaking sky, he doesn't feel like he's chanting words. He feels like he's transmitting frequency. Each phrase vibrates through his chest, subtle but alive, like the humming of a wire charged with invisible current. I am capable. I am chosen. I am unstoppable. I am becoming. At first it sounds mechanical, but after the 10th repetition, something inside aligns. The words stop coming from his mouth. They start rising from his soul. In that moment, he remembers Napoleon Hill's principle of autosuggestion, the conscious use of repetition to program the subconscious mind. Hill said, "Any idea, plan, or purpose may be placed in the mind through repetition of thought." Now it all makes sense. Autosuggestion isn't fantasy, it's frequency. Every thought carries vibration. Every emotion charges that vibration with energy. And the subconscious, being obedient and literal, receives these frequencies and builds reality from them. He stops walking and closes his eyes. The sunlight warms his face, and he imagines each affirmation as a spark entering the network of his brain. Each spark travels through him, rewiring hesitation into hunger, fear into focus, doubt into direction. He whispers, "Belief is not thinking it will happen. Belief is knowing it already has and acting like it." He recalls the man he once was, anxious, skeptical, rational to a fault. He used to dismiss words like vibration, frequency, faith, but life humbled him. Science explained how neurons fire, but it didn't explain why the same words spoken with conviction felt like electricity in the chest. He begins to see the connection now. Faith is physics in higher language. Every repeated thought strengthens a neural pathway. Every emotion attached to that thought amplifies the charge. That's vibration, not magic, but mechanism. He realizes that his old patterns of disbelief were not logical resistance, they were emotional conditioning. The brain, programmed by past failure, simply learned to expect repetition of the same. But what is learned can be unlearned. What is wired can be rewired. And belief spoken daily, lived hourly, is the most direct method of rewiring. As he continues walking, he feels lighter, not because the world changed, but because his interpretation of the world changed. Faith, he now knows, doesn't alter external events first, it alters internal perception, and perception alters response. Once response changes, outcome follows. Belief is not naive optimism, it's psychological precision. When he believes something, his brain begins to look for evidence to support it, a phenomenon psychologists call reticular activation. Napoleon Hill called it the law of attraction. Modern science calls it cognitive focus. Both describe the same mechanism. You see more of what you expect, so he decides to expect miracles. He smiles at the absurdity of it, not the shallow, wishful thinking kind of miracle, but the daily miracle of opportunity meeting preparation, of ideas meeting timing, of effort meeting reward. He begins to treat belief as fuel, invisible, renewable, infinite. He sets up a new daily practice. Each morning after his meditation, he looks at his reflection and speaks his creed. My thoughts are commands. My emotions are energy. My words are creation. At first it feels theatrical, but after weeks of repetition, he notices something strange. His energy carries further. People listen differently when he speaks. Doors that used to close begin to open. Random encounters align with his intentions. He realizes it's not coincidence, it's coherence. When the inner world and outer world match frequency, events align naturally. He begins studying the energy behind faith itself, not religion, but resonance. He learns that every thought emits measurable electromagnetic fields and emotions alter their strength. Gratitude produces coherency. Fear produces distortion. So, belief isn't blind, it's strategic alignment with higher order. He writes in his notebook, faith is focused without evidence, and later adds, belief is the architect of vibration. Every time he doubts, he remembers, belief is not a feeling, it's a decision. Feelings follow it, not lead it. He now trains himself to feel what he wants before it arrives, to experience the state of achievement internally so deeply that the subconscious begins to accept it as current reality. He practices this daily. He imagines a future goal as if it's already done. He feels the emotion of gratitude before receiving the result. He lives one step ahead of his circumstances, not in delusion, but in deliberate vibration. That's when faith turns into force. One afternoon during his walk, it begins to rain lightly. People rush for shelter, but he keeps walking, head tilted up, eyes closed, smiling. He feels every drop as a metaphor, each one a whisper from the universe. You are aligned. For years, he thought faith was waiting. Now he understands it's walking. You don't wait for conditions to prove belief right. You walk as if they already have. The rain grows heavier, but he doesn't care. The world can be chaotic. His frequency stays steady. That's what faith is, emotional sovereignty. Later that evening, he writes, belief does not guarantee ease. It guarantees endurance. He understands that faith is not about getting what you want. It's about becoming who you must be to handle what you receive. Without faith, effort burns out. With faith, effort becomes effortless, because faith converts exhaustion into momentum. It's the soul's renewable energy source. He remembers a time years ago when he stood before an opportunity but hesitated. His mind whispered, what if it doesn't work? He walked away, convincing himself he was being realistic. But now he sees the truth. Realism was fear in disguise. Every great leap in his life happened not because he knew the outcome, but because he believed beyond logic. That's when he realizes logic is a compass, but belief is the engine. You need both. Logic tells you where to go. Belief gives you the courage to go there. As days pass, his relationship with belief deepens. He no longer uses affirmations as motivation. He uses them as instruction. He doesn't say, I am strong to feel better. He says it to remind the subconscious how to behave. This is the power of autosuggestion. Repeated words become mental muscle memory. Eventually, the mind stops questioning them and begins executing them automatically. He realizes that the subconscious is like fertile soil. It doesn't question what you plant. It simply grows it. If you plant doubt, you harvest delay. If you plant faith, you harvest fulfillment. He writes in his notebook again, every affirmation is a seed. Every belief is a climate. He decides to tend his mental garden daily. Months later, his entire energy has changed. He walks taller, speaks slower, and carries silence like a shield. People feel peace around him without knowing why. That's the vibration of certainty, calm, quiet, magnetic. He no longer argues with skeptics. He doesn't need to. He simply lives the evidence. His success is not loud, it's luminous. He has learned that belief doesn't shout, it resonates. The most powerful people in the world aren't the loudest, they are the most aligned. Because the world doesn't respond to noise, it responds to frequency. One night, while writing by candlelight, he feels something stir a clarity that seems almost divine. He realizes that all human transformation follows the same path: thought, emotion, belief, identity, reality. Everything he ever became began as a single thought, repeated until it formed identity. He smiles. The secret was simple all along. The mind becomes what it rehearses. He whispers softly to himself, so, I'll keep rehearsing greatness. Weeks pass. His affirmations deepen into conviction. When he says, I am guided, he feels it. When he says, I am powerful, his body aligns. When he says, I am calm, storms lose their edge. He now understands the universal paradox. You don't believe after you see because you believe. Faith precedes form. Belief precedeth evidence. Vibration precedes manifestation. That's not superstition, it's sequence. He looks at the sky one evening, crimson clouds fading into twilight, and feels awe. He realizes how many years he spent doubting himself, not because he was weak, but because he was untrained in the language of belief. Faith, he realizes, is not something you are born with. It's something you practice like a muscle that grows only under tension. Every time he believed when nothing made sense, faith grew thicker fibers. Now it's strong enough to carry him through anything. Before bed, he whispers one final affirmation, voice calm and resolute. I am a transmitter of power. My thoughts radiate creation. My faith shapes reality. He feels peace settle in. Not the peace of passivity, but the peace of certainty, the knowing that he no longer needs to chase outcomes, because belief doesn't chase, it attracts. He turns off the light, and the last flicker of candle burns into darkness, mirroring the light within him that never dims. He smiles in the dark, knowing this truth. The energy of belief is not an idea, it's a frequency. And once you live on that frequency, nothing can resist you, because nothing can outlast faith. The day begins like any other sunlight breaking through his window, the faint hum of city life returning. But something feels different, not in the world, but in him, the quiet before a test. He can sense it, the universe preparing to measure what he has learned. The same obstacles that once broke him are coming back, but this time he's not the same man. This is the field of resistance, where faith meets friction. No one evolves without being tested. The universe doesn't test you to see you fail. It tests you to see if you've truly changed. It sends you familiar situations wrapped in new days, not to punish you, but to measure your response. He feels it immediately. The morning he wakes up late after weeks of discipline, the sudden email from a client backing out, the person he trusted not showing up. The old triggers return, chaos disguised as coincidence. But this time, he doesn't collapse into frustration. He pauses, breathes, observes. There is power in the pause. Before, he would react fast, defensive, emotional. Now he responds calm, deliberate, strategic. This is the proof of rewiring, not in peace when things go right, but in composure when everything goes wrong. He remembers Napoleon Hill's words echoing in his head. Every adversity carries within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. So he asks himself, where's the seed? Not why me, but what's the message? This simple shift from victim to observer changes everything. He's no longer emotionally hijacked by every problem. He's curious now. He studies resistance like a scientist studying pressure. He knows that resistance is not the enemy of growth, it's the proof of it. No muscle grows without strain. No faith strengthens without friction. He smiles faintly. The test has begun. That week, challenges multiply. His project faces delays. People misunderstand his intentions. A close friend distances himself. The old him would have taken it personally, spiraled into self-doubt, maybe even quit. But now he sees the pattern. The field of resistance isn't chaos, it's choreography. Every obstacle is perfectly placed to train emotional control. He whispers, "I've been here before." He remembers how he once cursed these seasons, nights of uncertainty, mornings of stress, but now he knows. Repetition is mastery's mother. The universe repeats the lesson until it becomes embodied truth. So instead of resisting the resistance, he embraces it. He writes in his journal that night, "Pressure is the classroom of permanence." And in that sentence, he feels something click, an understanding deeper than logic. That resistance is not a signal to stop. It's confirmation you're expanding beyond your old limits. Days pass. Each day brings a new test, an unexpected expense, a project that falls apart, a criticism that stings. He feels the tension rise, the heart rate quickening, the brain whispering old fears, but now he catches it mid-thought. He takes a deep breath, puts his hand over his chest, and whispers, "Calm is my power." The words aren't just affirmation anymore, they're activation. He can feel the pulse slow, the panic dissolve. He's learned the most valuable lesson of all. Control the inner current and the outer storm loses command. He begins to study how resistance really works. Every challenge, he realizes, exists on two levels. One, external resistance, the tangible problem in the world. Two, internal resistance, the emotional reaction within you. Most people fight the first and feed the second. They try to control circumstances instead of mastering response. But he chooses differently. When something goes wrong, he addresses the outer event logically, but he trains his emotions like a soldier trains endurance. He knows emotional energy is finite. If he wastes it on frustration, there's none left for progress. So now, whenever something tests him, he repeats a silent mantra. This is training. A delay, training in patience. A loss, training in perspective. A betrayal, training in discernment. A failure, training in faith. Every difficulty becomes a form of spiritual weightlifting. Each rep builds emotional muscle. One morning, he faces a test bigger than usual. A critical deal collapses. Weeks of effort evaporate. The old instinct, anger, panic, despair rises quickly, trying to reclaim power. For a few seconds, he feels it, the heat in his chest, the racing thoughts. But then something extraordinary happens. He doesn't drown in it. He simply watches it. Like a storm passing across the sky of his mind, the emotion surges, peaks, and fades. He breathes. He whispers, "I am not my emotion. I am the awareness behind it." That one sentence becomes his shield. Because the moment you realize you can observe an emotion, you are no longer controlled by it. The storm subsides, and he feels peace return, not because the situation fixed itself, but because he didn't break inside it. That's mastery, not escaping resistance, but remaining yourself inside it. Later, he reflects on how far he's come. He used to think confidence was loud about proving himself, dominating, showing strength. Now, he knows true confidence is silent, the kind that doesn't need to shout because it trusts its own foundation. Confidence, he realizes, is not the absence of fear, it's the decision that fear doesn't dictate behavior. He writes, "Confidence is consistency under pressure. When others crumble, he stays steady not because he's superhuman, but because he's trained in the invisible gym of resistance." Weeks later, a new challenge emerges, one that feels deeply personal. Someone he helped rises above him and forgets his contribution. It stings. But instead of resentment, he feels gratitude. He whispers, "Good. Another test. Another mirror." Because resistance always reveals where pride still hides. He takes the experience and transforms it into fuel. He doubles down on his own vision, no longer seeking validation. He understands now, the universe doesn't test to punish ego, it tests to purify it. Every time someone misunderstands him, every time he feels unseen, it's not rejection, it's refinement. He smiles and writes again. Endurance is quiet, faith under friction. One day he's driving home through a thunderstorm wind howling, rain hitting the windshield with fury. Visibility drops, the road blurs, a car swerves dangerously close. His heart races, but instinctively he slows down, breathes, centers himself. The outside world is chaos, inside stillness. That's when it hits him. Life is this exact drive, storms everywhere, but control lies in how tightly you grip the wheel. You can't command the weather, but you can command your steering. He smiles faintly and whispers, "Steady hands, steady heart." Back home, soaked and tired, he sits by the window watching lightning split the sky. He feels something sacred, not pride, not excitement, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when you realize you can survive any season without losing yourself. Resistance, he realizes, never leaves. It evolves with you. The more you grow, the subtler it becomes, but its purpose stays the same, to strengthen what success will demand later. He whispers to the night, "The storm doesn't come to stop me. It comes to prepare me for the wind that higher altitudes bring." Months pass, and life begins to mirror his inner calm. The same situations that once overwhelmed him now feel manageable. He notices people around him still reacting emotionally, still blaming, still panicking, and he understands with compassion that they simply haven't trained yet. Because mastery isn't knowledge, it's repetition under resistance. He becomes a quiet example. When others complain, he listens. When they ask how he stays calm, he says softly, "Because I treat every obstacle as rehearsal." They laugh, not fully understanding. But that's fine. Wisdom doesn't need to convince, it needs to live. One evening during meditation, a final truth surfaces, gentle but absolute. The universe doesn't test your strength, it reveals it. Resistance doesn't create weakness, it exposes where strength still needs to grow. He thinks back on every test, the failures, betrayals, delays, losses, and realizes they were not interruptions in his journey. They were the journey. Each one sculpted him, sanded him, clarified him. The pain was polishing. The delay was direction. The chaos was choreography. He closes his eyes and smiles. "I understand now," he whispers. Resistance was never the enemy. It was the forge. The next morning he wakes before sunrise and walks outside. The air is cold, the sky faintly orange. He can feel resistance even here in the cold, in the fatigue, in the body's whisper to rest. But he moves anyway, slow steps, deep breath. Not out of stubbornness, but out of devotion. He knows now that discipline and faith mean nothing without resistance. It is friction that awakens power. He lifts his hands toward the sky and says, "Thank you for the weight, because it's the only thing that makes me strong." The morning light spills softly across the room. He stands before a mirror, the same mirror that once reflected exhaustion, doubt, and defeat. The air is still, but the silence carries weight. He doesn't stand there to judge or to criticize. He stands there to witness, to recognize, to finally see what all the storms, the falls, and the endless nights of rebuilding have made of him. For the first time in years, he isn't looking for flaws. He isn't checking the scars, the tired eyes, or the gray in his hair. He's looking through the reflection into the story carved beneath the surface. It's strange, almost surreal. The same man who once avoided this reflection now feels gratitude for it. The mirror, which once exposed his pain, now reveals his proof. Every scar a line of survival. Every wrinkle a mark of wisdom. Every bruise a lesson branded into being. He doesn't see brokenness anymore. Esse is design deliberate, divine, necessary. He thinks back to the beginning of the journey, the nights when he whispered, "Why me?" The days when he nearly gave up. The countless times he mistook stillness for stagnation, pain for punishment, delay for denial. Now he understands. None of it was working against him, it was working through him. Failure wasn't the villain. It was the architect chiseling away everything false, shaping everything real. Every collapse that once felt like the end was simply excavation. Life had to dig deep enough to find the foundation strong enough to hold his purpose. He looks at his reflection again and feels a kind of quiet awe, not at who he is, but at who he had to become to stand here. He whispers softly, "I'm proud of you." The words echo in the still air. He's not saying them to impress himself, he's saying them to honor himself. Because pride isn't arrogance when it's born from endurance. It's reverence, the acknowledgement that you didn't quit when quitting made sense. He takes a deep breath and notices how calm it feels, how natural, how grounded. This is not the fire of ambition anymore. It's the warmth of acceptance. Acceptance, not the kind that settles, but the kind that sees clearly. He realizes that mastery isn't about control. It's about harmony, living in rhythm with your truth, not wrestling against it. He spent years trying to control outcomes, manipulate timing, prove worth, but mastery revealed itself only when he surrendered to the process. Because the moment you stop needing to prove, you start to be. And being is the highest form of becoming. He studies his own eyes, there's light in them again. Not the restless spark of ambition, but the steady glow of peace. He realizes that self-respect was never about achievement. It was about alignment. He had to fail to understand his worth was never tied to winning. He smiles faintly, remembering the old version of himself, the man who thought love, success, and validation had to be earned through exhaustion. Now he knows better. You don't earn worth. You remember it. That's the mirror's message this morning, not that he's finally enough, but that he always was. He turns and walks slowly across the room. Each step feels lighter, freer, the inner noise that once filled his mind gone, the constant dialogue of what-ifs and not-yets silent. Silence no longer feels empty. It feels sacred. It feels like home. He sits down with his journal and writes only one line. Peace is not the reward, it's the proof. Because you know you've reached mastery not when the world applauds, but when the mind goes quiet. When your thoughts no longer fight your faith. When your emotions no longer resist your direction. When your past no longer owns your present. That's the real victory, to be at peace within your own skin. He looks back on everything, the failures, the breakthroughs, the transformation, and realizes that every version of him was necessary. The naive dreamer, the broken warrior, the rebuilding believer. They all had a purpose. Each one carried the torch to the next, ensuring the fire never went out. He whispers softly, "Thank you," to all of them. Because integration is not about becoming someone new, it's about welcoming every version of yourself into unity. The boy who wanted approval, the man who demanded control, the soul who finally learned to trust, all coexist now, one whole being, finally aligned. He remembers the nights he stared at the ceiling, asking God if there was meaning behind the pain. Now he realizes the meaning was him. He was the lesson forming. The transformation wasn't happening to him, it was happening as him. Each tear that fell was a baptism into deeper truth. Each heartbreak was a graduation from illusion. Each loss was a realignment toward legacy. This realization brings tears not of sadness, but of recognition. He finally sees the divine pattern that was always at work. He whispers, "You were never behind. You were being built." He stands again before the mirror. For a moment, he just breathes deeply, slowly, gratefully. Then, with a quiet smile, he nods at his reflection. This time, he doesn't see success as something to chase. He sees peace as something to protect. He no longer measures progress by trophies or applause. He measures it by how calmly he can face what once terrified him. He's not addicted to the climb anymore. He's in love with the balance, that sacred space between striving and surrender. He begins to understand why the greatest masters throughout history always spoke in paradoxes. To gain control, surrender control. To rise, you must kneel. To lead, you must serve. To be strong, you must be still. These were not poetic riddles, they were instructions for alignment. And now, standing here, he understands them not with intellect, but with experience. The mirror reflects a man who has lived the paradox and come out whole. He sits again, closes his eyes, and listens. Not for sound, but for feeling. There it is, that gentle hum beneath the heart, the quiet vibration of being at peace with oneself. He finally understands that confidence, clarity, and calm aren't rewards of success, they are the state of mastery. And mastery, he realizes, is not about perfection, it's about presence. To be here, to be whole, to be unshaken. He smiles. That's enough. That's everything. He looks at his hands again, once trembling, now steady. He recalls how many times these hands built, failed, and rebuilt. And for the first time, he sees them not as tools, but as testimonies. Every act of creation, every letter written, every discipline practiced, they've become the language of his becoming. He whispers, "You did it," not meaning he's done, because mastery is never an ending. It's a continuation, a deepening. You don't finish mastery, you live it. That evening, he steps outside. The sunset paints the world in gold. Everything glows, even the cracks in the pavement seem beautiful. He feels the wind against his face and thinks, so this is what peace feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, soft, weightless, eternal. The world still has chaos. Life still has challenges. But he has changed relationship with them. They no longer invade him, they inform him. He no longer reacts to life, he collaborates with it. That's what mastery is, not domination, but dialogue. He glances at his reflection once more, this time in the window pane of his home. The fading sunlight merges with his outline, and he realizes he and the world are reflections of the same light. Everything he sought outside was already inside, waiting for him to notice. He smiles, whispers one final sentence, and it echoes like a closing prayer. I am not who I was, and that is the greatest victory. Golden light fills the horizon as he walks forward, unhurried and free. The air carries the scent of renewal. The city behind him hums faintly, like a world just awakening. Each step is deliberate, not chasing, not proving, simply being. The long night is over. The dawn within has arrived. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the pursuit ends, not because the mountain has been conquered, but because the climber finally realizes he was the mountain all along. This is that moment. The man who once lived in resistance now walks in rhythm. The world, once heavy with expectation, now feels weightless. The golden light spills over his shoulders, and with each breath, he feels something sacred, a quiet, eternal calm that does not depend on success, on applause, or even on certainty. This peace is not a prize, it is identity. He has crossed the invisible line between striving and becoming. And in that crossing, the war inside him is ended. He remembers the man he used to be, the one who woke up with anxiety in his chest, chasing validation like oxygen. The one who measured self-worth by results, who mistook speed for progress and applause for truth. That man is gone. Not buried, but transformed, his ashes scattered into the soil of wisdom. Now, there is only stillness. Stillness not of inactivity, but of knowing. Knowing that life unfolds not through force, but through flow. He whispers to the dawn, I no longer chase, I attract. I no longer strive, I align. The words carry power because they are not affirmations anymore, they are realizations. He stops walking and stands at the edge of a hill overlooking the city. The streets below are waking cars moving, people hurrying, windows lighting up the same rhythm that once overwhelmed him. But now, it feels like music. Every sound, every motion, every beam of light seems synchronized with his own heartbeat. He feels the pulse of life not outside him, but within him. He has discovered the secret of true strength. It's not about how loud you roar, but how deeply you breathe when the world demands reaction. Strength is not a posture. It's a presence. It's the calm in the storm, the pause before the choice, the smile in the uncertainty. That's the energy he carries now, silent confidence, divine steadiness. He closes his eyes and lets the sunlight touch his face. For a moment he feels weightless, as if time itself has stopped measuring him. Gratitude rises in his chest, not the kind you speak, but the kind that hums quietly, wordless and full. He feels gratitude for everything, the victories, yes, but more so the defeats. For the nights when he was lost, for the people who left, for the plans that failed, for the moments he thought were endings but were really entrances. He whispers softly, thank you, failure, for being my first teacher. Thank you, pain, for burning away my illusions. Thank you, resistance, for revealing my power. The wind catches his voice and carries it upward, not as a prayer for more, but as gratitude for enough. He now understands the final paradox of growth. You do not find peace after achieving mastery. You find mastery in becoming peaceful. Peace was not waiting at the finish line. It was waiting the moment he stopped running. He smiles, realizing that he had never needed to escape failure. He only needed to embrace its purpose. Because every fall had been a hidden form of rising, every delay a disguised form of direction, every wound a doorway to wisdom. What once felt like punishment was actually preparation. He laughs softly, not in pride, but in wonder. The horizon grows brighter, the sky alive with color, amber, rose, gold. It feels like watching his own soul paint the morning. He realizes something profound. The sunrise outside is only a reflection of the sunrise within. For months, he fought to create light in his life, not realizing he was the light all along. Every human being, he now knows, carries that same radiance buried beneath layers of doubt, fear, and expectation. Once you strip those away, the divine spark reveals itself, unhidden and unstoppable. He whispers, "This light was never missing. I was simply facing the wrong direction." He sits down on the grass, closes his eyes, and breathes in the day. The silence feels alive, not empty, but full of presence. He realizes how much of life he once missed by rushing through it, chasing goals, escaping silence, filling space with noise. Now he finds meaning in stillness, divinity in simplicity. The universe doesn't reward more movement, it rewards more awareness. That's what the sunrise teaches him. There is no rush. The light comes at its own pace, and yet it never fails to come. He smiles again. So do I, he thinks. I rise at my own pace, and I never fail to rise. He reflects on what power truly means now. Power is not dominance, it's direction. It's not loud, it's luminous. It doesn't demand attention, it commands energy through intention. Power is being unmoved in a moving world. He remembers the moments when life tried to bend him, when loss struck, when people betrayed him, when fear whispered that he wasn't enough. And yet, here he stands whole, grounded, grateful. He didn't conquer those storms. He simply stopped resisting them. He became like water, adaptable, flowing, unbreakable. And that's the lesson the sunrise whispers every day. Light doesn't fight darkness. It dissolves it by being itself. He feels tears forming not of sadness, but of sacred understanding. Everything he sought outside was a mirror of something he needed to awaken inside. Love, validation, peace, success, all internal frequencies waiting to be tuned. He sees it clearly now. When you align internally, the external world becomes effortless. When you live from faith, the universe rearranges itself to serve your purpose. He writes a final sentence in his journal. The sunrise is not an event, it is a state of being. And as he closes the notebook, he feels complete, not finished, but fulfilled. As he stands to leave, the world feels new. Even the smallest details, the sound of birds, the smell of earth, the warmth of wind seem alive with hidden beauty. He walks slowly, unhurried, no longer chasing destiny, because he's finally walking with it. This is the reward of transformation, not power over life, but partnership with it. The man who once walked through nights of confusion now walks into mornings of clarity. He no longer seeks to be saved by the world. He has become the salvation of his own mind. The sun climbs higher, its golden rays stretching across his path like an anointing. He smiles quietly and whispers, "I made it not to a destination, but to myself." He thinks of everyone still lost in their storms, the dreamers still doubting, the believers still breaking, the hearts still healing, and he feels compassion, not superiority. Because he knows they are not behind, they are simply becoming. The sunrise comes for everyone, some just need a longer night to recognize its light. He sends them silent strength. May you find what I found, not victory, but vision, not certainty, but peace. He keeps walking until the city disappears behind him, until only the sound of his own footsteps remains. He's not in a hurry to arrive anywhere anymore. The journey is the destination now. Each step is prayer. Each breath is gratitude. Each heartbeat is testimony. He has become what Napoleon Hill described long ago, a man whose mind is governed by faith, whose heart is immune to fear, and whose soul lives in conscious cooperation with the divine. That is mastery. That is sunrise. He reaches the top of a small hill as the sun fully ascends. The light bathes him completely, face, hands, and soul. For a moment, he feels invisible and infinite all at once. He realizes enlightenment isn't about escaping the world. It's about walking through it illuminated. He opens his arms and lets the sunlight pour over him. He whispers, "I am not chasing the light anymore. I am becoming it." And in that moment, time stands still. The universe pauses in reverence. A man has remembered who he is. I am the sunrise within. My peace is power, my stillness strength. I no longer chase, I align. I no longer strive, I shine. For I have become what I once sought. He walks into the golden horizon, his silhouette framed by the morning light, calm, confident, eternal. There is no background music now. No applause, only the soft hum of life itself. Because true transformation makes no noise. It simply radiates. The screen fades to white, and in the quiet glow, one final line appears. The sunrise was never in the sky, it was always in you.